We are live, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 480 for April 6th, 2015. I'm by myself. Where's everybody? Come on, it's Monday night. We got the national championship game, the basketball game on here, Duke, Wisconsin. But come on, you use the second screen experience. You can watch them both. Maybe I've got the whole 90 minutes to myself here. No, we are expecting to have a great show tonight. We are going to talk more about the issue that was started here 2 weeks ago. We had Mike Smith of AccuWeather. Mike was critical of the National Weather Service and their impact-based warnings. And so we're going to have a representative from the National Weather Service Central Region on the show tonight to discuss and maybe make some comments concerning what Mike had to say. So this should be a good show. Maybe some fireworks along the way. But in case you've never watched, this is the pre-show. This is typically where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and work out technical boo-boos, and try and get somebody on the show other than me. Brian Peters is out tonight. Typically, Brian gets on early. Brian's lovely wife had some health issues, and he's tending to her, which he should do. And Bill Murray is mysteriously out, but I think everybody else is in. I do believe we've even got Aubrey back. Aubrey had her honeymoon. Wow. So she's back. Rick Smith had a spotter talk, but he is going to be back. And again, I will fire. In fact, let me see if I can get our guest on. Maybe this will be a first. Maybe we'll get our guest on the show before anybody else. Mike Hudson of Central Region. So let's see if we can fire this up and get Mike on the show here. Oh, yeah, this looks good. He has just been invited. Maybe we could do like a one-on-one interview. We've never had one of those. That would be a different flavor for this show. Duke 6, Wisconsin 5. Yeah, look, most people watch this later. They listen later. We know that. But a lot of people are watching, so goodness. So what's going on here? What crazy things can I say since it's just me? It's April, and it's tornado season. And looks like it might get active this week for our friends in St. Louis and Kansas City and Tulsa, maybe Oklahoma City a little later this week. Big brouhaha over the Marlins, their home opener today. Some bonehead wasn't paying attention, and they have a retractable roof. And somebody just plain out wasn't paying attention, and it started raining. They had a rain delay, and apparently they don't have a tarp because they have a roof. And then the articles, I saw one on Deadspin, one on ESPN said that they were looking at some app, and as you all know, we like to call them crap apps. You saw that piece, didn't you, John?
Oh yeah, I did.
They don't have any support from a professional there. Apparently, it was just some manager looking at an app. So
isn't that astounding? That's why I said somebody's got a job waiting for them.
No kidding, man. That is a golden opportunity for somebody.
That's what I thought.
Boy, that was something. So, John, I'm glad you're here because I was just talking to myself. I was sharing my own boring personal stories. I think everybody's watching this basketball game.
I am too, actually.
I've always got monitors in here, and of course I conveniently move them around to show whatever I have an interest in. So I will say in my bracket, I only fill out one. Some people fill out like 100.
Sure.
I fill out one, and my one bracket, the two I had playing for the national championship, Kentucky and Duke. So missed the Kentucky pick, but Duke is in there, so we'll see. Hey, Mike, can you hear us?
I sure can. Can you hear me, James?
Oh, loud and clear. Man, this is great. Video is clean. Audio is. We had all kind of trouble last week, so we're just glad we got some clean audio and video here. This is great.
I'm glad things are working good. You just never know.
Man, you got some bandwidth, man. That's good
That's
looking
a great
video.
picture too. Wow.
What kind of camera is that?
It's a Logitech, but it's hooked to gigabit internet. So there you go.
Oh, okay.
That's cheating.
See, I've got that same Logitech up here, but I don't have gigabit Ethernet here, so I'm not that fortunate.
Kansas City's pretty fortunate.
Is this Google Fiber?
Yes, it's a Google Fiber, yeah.
Oh man, jealous, goodness. And we're about to move, so we're moving to another house. We're actually building a house, and we're going to rent one for a while, but it's all in the same neighborhood. But they don't have Charter. In our house, we use Charter, which is a cable ISP, and it's good. I will say it has been consistent. It's been good. I think I get like 50, 55 megs, but they don't have this cable company in this development. It is literally across the street, and so I'm going to have to use AT&T Uverse. And from what I can tell, I'm going to take a bandwidth hit with this. I think the top they offer is 18 megs in this neighborhood.
Oh, that's too bad. AT&T starting to offer gigabit service in a lot of towns now.
Yeah, that's the thing. I saw where they're rolling it out, but they're not in this market yet. So and I was one of the first DSL customers probably in America. I mean, I was a DSL customer number one. And back in those days, you got like 1.5 meg down. That was huge. But you're coming off dial-up, going to that.
Oh yeah.
But I just don't think logistically they can offer anything better than what they're doing on that Uverse system until they go to fiber, which is apparently what they're rolling out. Aubrey, have you got that new mic yet?
Nope, not yet.
Oh.
I know. I was on my honeymoon last week. Give me a break.
I thought everybody on their honeymoon goes to buy microphones.
I was off social media, off the internet, and it was glorious.
Yeah.
Wow. So we're really going to have some nosy personal questions for Aubrey.
That's right.
You got it.
Does the name tag in the bottom look okay?
Yeah. In fact, I need to turn mine on here. I'm not.
I figured out how to do that here today at work. So.
No, this is a good little platform. Once you kind of get used to it. Let's see here. All right, let's turn it on. So now mine's on there. Kevin.
Hey,
Kevin.
Hi.
Hey, Kev, check out Mike's video here. Gigabit Ethernet provided by Google Fiber.
Wow.
Look at the video quality here.
Ooh. He's almost lifelike.
Almost lifelike. You could almost say I'm human.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Doing fine, Rick. How are you doing?
Gigabit. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, not too bad.
Gigabit Ethernet on the old fiber. Man.
Yeah, that's pretty sharp.
So it's time. We're on the cable. Welcome to our cable television viewers. This is James, and you know the deal. Long-time viewers know the situation. We're in the pre-show. We'll start the show here in just a matter of moments. We are waiting on Nate and, let's see, Rick Smith, and I think that's it. Bill, who made Bill mad? Bill just quit the show, didn't he?
I know. It's what it seems like.
I saw him last week.
Well, was he angry at you?
No, not at all. We had dinner and everything while they were on their way to DC for spring break. It was fun. We were to dinner for like 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours.
So he's not mad at Aubrey, so that narrows it down. It's either Kevin or me or John.
He must have been offended on how I treated Mike Smith.
Well, no, he quit. He quit like way before that. It was like 3 or 4 shows before Mike Smith. So.
I think he's purposely scheduling things on Mondays.
How was your honeymoon, Aubrey?
It was wonderful. The only thing is we could not take the bear.
Oh.
But it was great. The weather was really good, and it was a lot of fun. We got to do a lot, but we also relaxed. So it was a nice balance.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah, it was
Nosy
great.
personal questions. All right, let's get this thing started because everybody else will just kind of join in progress here. So let me hit the magic record buttons here. Record 1 and record 2. And here we go in 5. Whoops, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains! Time for the weekly show all about weather. This is WeatherBrains episode number 480 for April 6, 2015. We are gearing up for the core of the tornado season. The spring, pollen, allergies, storms, it all happens at once here. This is James Spann. Thank you for joining us. We have a few folks that are out this week. We've got Brian Peters, who is dealing with some family health issues. His wife's had a few little issues, and he's doing what he should do. He's tending to her tonight. Bill Murray is out. We're trying to figure out who made Bill mad. Bill hadn't been on here in like 2 months. He hung up. Remember he hung up on us one night. And he hasn't been back. So and it's not Aubrey because Aubrey, you went to dinner with Bill, right?
Yeah, it was Saturday, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before, the day we left before our honeymoon.
So it's not you. So it's got to be Kevin, John, or me. And if I have any of those three, it's got to be Kevin.
Well, I'm trying to think. Why? I am the accelerant, so
That's right.
I must have done something wrong.
That is such a good name.
Oh yeah, I have to put that on my lower third here for the video viewers. How are you guys?
We're good. Kevin is in Wichita Falls, Texas, and we are going to discuss impact-based warnings and give the Weather Service a chance to answer some of the critical comments that Mike Smith of AccuWeather had here a couple of weeks ago. We'll introduce our guest in just a moment, but Kevin was involved in that discussion. Kevin, is your underwear still flapping up and down your legs?
Well, yeah, I'm afraid to say anything now. I guess I was too mean to him and ran him off.
No, I like we go on. We're all big boys here, big girls. We can take criticism.
Well, I've just heard a number of things since then. That it just apparently wherever he shows up, it turns into an AccuWeather commercial, and that's fine if you have a business. But that little exchange we had, it just didn't seem appropriate the way he was picking on the Weather Service. And I mean, I like the Weather Service as much as the next person. I'm not working for the Weather Service, but I like our friend Rick Smith, of course, and all of those folks that work there. They just didn't seem to deserve that level of nonsense that he was putting out there, in my humble opinion.
Cool.
Look at this. We're not even 10 seconds into the show, and you've already made me grumpy.
No.
I want you to be involved because you and for those that are maybe new here, some of us work the night shift. We are actually at our employer's location.
Yeah.
We're paid to do these television weathercasts, and we have to. Kevin has an early one that's right as the show begins, so he has to kind of come and go. So I like to get you stirred up early, so you come back after that first newscast you do, and you're really cranky.
That's good. Yes, all the Fox show viewers here in Wichita Falls deserve an angry weatherman coming on Monday night show. Look, here's your forecast. Get over it.
It's great.
Research shows people like that.
Well, exactly.
I think, Kevin, if I did that, the next thing I'd hear would be a phone call from the news director saying, we don't do that.
Of course, that's Dr. John Scala, who is in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. John, how's the spring coming along?
Oh, my goodness. Warmest day here since October the 28th. Right, Aubrey? Wasn't it fantastic?
Yeah, today was great. We've had I don't know, last week I think it was windy and wild. I kept getting these alerts on my phone. I was like, vacation.
Yeah. One thing we've had no shortage of is wind around here. And
yeah,
we're watching this boundary to our north that was producing snow in upstate New York yesterday, and it's going to do a little bit of this waviness over the next couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an opportunity for a forecast bust, big time.
Yeah,
Yep.
no doubt. Well, let's bring in Mike here. Mike Hudson is the Chief Operating Officer for the National Weather Service Central Region. Mike, did I say that right?
You said it just fine. Good evening.
Right. And let me just kind of go back, and Kevin, help me out here. So we had Mike Smith of a private firm, AccuWeather, and Mike is an executive, and he had a few critical things to say about impact-based warnings. Is that right so far, Kevin?
Yeah, it is, actually. I'll speak for Kevin. I don't know what happened to him, but
Okay.
I was trying to moderate.
I don't know if I'm having bandwidth or James is. I'm not sure.
I think James is, actually.
Oh, great. That's all we need is bandwidth issues here. We
Yeah.
had plenty of that last week.
No,
I missed
And I'm
most
trying-
of the setup of that.
No, I was going back and just kind of describing that Mike Smith was critical of impact-based warnings. Correct?
well, that was one of the things he was critical of. But I was trying to moderate that discussion, and it got away from me, and I lost track of having an even field here, a level playing field, and it became extremely one-sided. And Kevin stepped in there and brought it back towards center, which I greatly appreciated.
So, and we got Rick Smith on here. Rick, how you doing? And Rick, I think you're muted. Or perhaps you've got the wrong audio source, or...
All right, how about now?
Oh, loud
There we
and
go.
clear. Very
There's
good.
an on and off switch on the microphone. Who knew? But no, I'm back. Just got back from doing a presentation up the road between here and Tulsa, and I'm glad to be here.
Great. Well, I think you know your associate Mike, do you not?
Mike Hudson?
Yes.
Yes, yes. I know that
Okay.
Mike.
Hi, Rick.
Hey, Mike, how you doing? Good to see you.
I'm great. Good to see you.
So, and again, we're just kind of setting up what happened here. You can go back and listen to this. In fact, Kevin, you want me to play this audio clip that you gave me here from that show? I can.
Sure, yeah, I came back. I signed off for a second there. It may have been my bandwidth. I don't know, but go ahead.
Okay. All right. So here we go. Now listen carefully. Hang on, get the volume turned down. Here we go.
However, if you are going into the app business, you have to be able to have a version for Windows. You have to have a version for Apple. You have to have a version for Chrome. You have to have a version for Android, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're either in the software business or you're not, and the Weather Service would be having to constantly revise the app, constantly update it. It would be no small task to keep it up to date.
So Kevin, this was another issue that we got into. You believe that AccuWeather is doing things to prevent the Weather Service from getting their own app, right?
Yeah, I think we have plenty of history of that. I mean, at one point in time, there was some lawsuit, I know. I'd have to go back and it's on Wikipedia or something, where at one point in time the AccuWeather, I think, sued the Weather Service against something that had to do with with them competing in the commercial space, and I thought that was ridiculous. But the thing that just kind of pushed me over, and that's why I sent you that little bite there, where he's just trying. I have heard tell that AccuWeather wants to take over certain processes that the Weather Service does as a business entity, and they would get paid for that, as opposed to the Weather Service doing those things with our tax dollars, which they've done very well and very ably for many, many years, and they all have servants' hearts, and they're not out there trying to make an extra buck or run companies. They're trying to serve the public, and Rick is a prime leading example of that. But this business about, they constantly have to do this and they're constantly going to have to do that with an app, makes them, he's trying to position them as a bunch of 2-year-olds who can't do any programming. The Weather Service operates, and I don't know who does it, maybe Rick can tell us, but operates a fairly complicated and involved website that I assume gets gajillions of hits every day, and then because of AccuWeather and others' objections to them being in the mobile space and having an app, that's why I think, if you connect the dots, we got this thing that we talked about a few weeks ago, Rick, where you have to go to a website and then you can save it, at least on the iPhone, as an icon on your phone. And while that's cool, and I actually use it, it's not the way most people handle data on their phones. They know how to go to the App Store and get apps. But this idea that they're not capable of programming stuff when they are already programming plenty of digital stuff, to me, was just insulting. And what he's trying to do is position his company in the eyes of the government or somebody as the one that can handle that, since the Weather Service can't. And I just thought that was insulting.
So Mike, what say you in this first matter about apps and web development and all this?
Well, from around the corner and into the fire, huh?
Well done, Mike.
That's what we do on the show.
Absolutely. Well, James, most everyone in today's world is getting their information off of mobile devices, and folks in the Weather Service aren't not knowledgeable of that. We're certainly well aware that that is the 21st century, at least the 2015 version of what the PC was back in the mid to late 1990s. It is a challenge. There are some very valid things that Mike raised in that type of a discussion. You do have a certain tail that comes with maintaining and developing those types of tools, and weather is one of the most popular tools, or one of the most popular apps that's out there on most of the major app stores. So, it's a balance, it's a challenge. We've been working on this big thing. It'll sound a little corporate-y like, but we've been working on this thing called the IDP, which is the Integrated Dissemination Portfolio. Big fancy words, but what it basically means is taking a look at how we get the word out to people from end to end. There's a real sharp guy back in Weather Service headquarters and a team that's been formed as part of our reorganization to tackle this and to look at those types of issues. Everything from the connectivity that our offices have to the internet and to each other, to how we get that information out the last mile. And certainly a big piece of that does involve the private sector, does involve the broadcast media, involves a whole lot of people, because it's one of those things. A lot of folks will tell you that when you get a situation, I mean, having an app or having a tool or whatever is fantastic, but most people will go crowdsource it then. So they're still checking multiple locations. They're going to check the apps on different vendors, different media sites, different private weather vendors. So it's good for that all to be present in the marketplace, to be able to share that information. One of the keys, and kind of one of the keys of why we worked on this IBW project a few years ago, is honing the consistency of that message, because it's important that Aubrey and Nate say the same thing that I'm saying when we issue a warning. Lots of studies have been done that show that when we all are saying different things, that does lead to confusion, that does lead to inaction. So it's important to have us talking similar messages, and then if we're all able to do it on the same platforms people check, that's good.
But let me go back to this app thing. Is there any kind of pressure coming from AccuWeather or some private firm to keep the Weather Service from developing a mobile app?
That's well above my pay grade, so to speak, James. I don't know anything about that. It is something that we talk about. It is something that we recognize is a way of sharing information with people, and there's certainly a role for, I think, lots of different vendors, lots of different people in that marketplace.
Okay.
So why was the thing? I don't know what you call. What do we call it, Rick? We talked about it a few weeks ago. It's the thing that you can. It's a website that you guys can go in. Is there a name for that product?
It has a fancy name. Mike might know it, but I just call it the mobile. It's kind of an adaptive mobile web page thingy. That's the technical term.
That's a good term, Rick.
So why was the adaptive mobile technical thingy deployed, Mike, as opposed to an app?
Well, a lot of the apps that are out there, actually, for a lot of different companies, not weather things in general, but just in apps in general, are no more than mobile web pages that have a little bit of wrapping around them that make them quote-unquote an app. They allow it to load onto the phone and run as a program, but by proxy, they just go and fetch data off the web. So not too dissimilar from having, say, a mobile website that you can save to the front face of your phone and click and be able to access information.
Would you agree that the comment I made about most people know how to go to the App Store and get an app, as opposed to going to this particular site and punching in and then having to save that as an icon on their phone's desktop? I would argue that far fewer people know how to do that. And anecdotally, I thought Rick said a couple weeks ago that maybe that was the case because you guys were having to train folks one by one on the phone. But why deploy that as opposed to an app through the App Store?
Sure, I think you're probably right, Kevin, that it is probably easier to do. The nice innovation tool that some folks down there in Southern Region and others came up with, though, is a good first step. It's a good way to be able to access Weather Service information. It's not glitzy, fancy, doesn't have a lot of the bells and whistles that you'll find, obviously, in other private type of offerings, but the data is there, and the information is there for someone who wants to go in and to load it.
And Mike mentioned in that discussion that he said something about meetings that he attends and AccuWeather attends and the Weather Channel attends and I guess some other players in the weather enterprise. Do you know what meetings he would be referring to?
The only thing I can think of, Kevin, is probably our semi-annual partners meetings that we have at the AMS annual meeting and usually try to have over the summer back in Washington, D.C.
Who goes to those?
Anyone and everyone that wants to come. It's an open invite from the Weather Service to anyone in the weather industry that wants to come and partake in learning what we're up to and learning what each other is up to within the enterprise.
As somebody who's been to those meetings, Kevin, I may be able to speak to that a little bit. Essentially, the meetings are an opportunity for the people who interface with the Weather Service at a fairly low level, if you will. Folks that consume lots of Weather Service data or price. I love this. He asks a question and then he gets up and walks away.
Listening. I'm right here. I'm listening. I'm preparing for my show. Here, let me, just so Nate won't feel abandoned. All right, but I have to go enter data into the computer.
So essentially, the meetings are for like the major partners and the vendors. There you go. Thank you. To interface with the Weather Service, to provide feedback to the Weather Service on certain things that they're doing, a very limited subset of things typically, but I went as a representative of Barron Services when I worked for Barron, went to a number of those meetings, and I found them to be a good exchange of feedback and ideas, but really it's an opportunity for those who are let's say the biggest consumers of what the Weather Service puts out in terms of data, radar data, satellite data, model data, forecast data, NDFD data, the whole 9 yards, and to provide feedback on how that's working, how it could be done better, that kind of thing.
And Mike said that they expressed their displeasure at the idea of the Weather Service having an app at one of these meetings, like as he put it, like anybody else, any public citizen could do. Do you have any insight into that?
That I don't, because I wasn't at the meeting where those comments were made.
Yeah. I just wonder if it's that or if it's some other place where they stand up and go, no, we don't want you to have an app. We don't like this idea.
I suspect that might have happened at one of those meetings, or it might have happened at another time in another context.
I would imagine I can picture that happening, and I've only been to one of those partner meetings back when I worked at regional headquarters years and years ago, and wasn't much to it, but I can imagine those kinds of discussions, if they do indeed happen, being more informal offline, off to the side, during a break at AMS or something like that. I can fully see that would probably be the most likely scenario, but I have no insight. I mean, I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah. The couple of those meetings that I went to were very collegial. There was an atmosphere of actual partnership, of folks working together for common good, and at the end of the day, we all walk away wanting slightly different versions of the same thing. AccuWeather has a particular bent that they want. The Weather Service has a particular bent that they want. We as Barron had a particular bent on it that we wanted, and so on and so forth. WSI was there. I'm trying to think of some of the other folks that were there. I mean, typically the folks that are considered the vendors for the TV folks were the biggest players that were there, but certainly not the only ones. And now that we've seen the private sector sort of grow a little bit in terms of, you've got players like WDT and WeatherBug and whatnot, they're starting to play a big role in that. I'd imagine they're attending those meetings now, whereas they didn't before because they either didn't exist or didn't feel like they needed to.
Hey, Mike, I've got a question. I know I don't think I've missed much here, but getting a little bit into the impact-based warnings in just a little bit. Talk about how there was just recently a big expansion in the number of offices that are involved in impact-based warnings. Kind of talk about that and where that came from, and what the plans are for the future.
Sure, Rick. Well, yeah, we did just recently do an expansion across the Weather Service, added another 19 offices in the southern region of the U.S. Everybody but the coastal locations there along the Gulf and the Atlantic coast in the southeast got added, and then we added a few others out, Nate, in your direction, out in the eastern part of the country, and a couple as well up in Montana, about the one location in the western region of the U.S. that does get a fair amount of significant severe weather west of the Rockies, as everyone I'm sure on this show knows. It drops off considerably. It has grown every year as sort of an iteration. And, a lot of things that impact-based warnings really is versus what it really isn't, what it really boils down to is we found after the events of 2011 that it's just good for us to be able to talk to people about what it is we know. And any of us that have sat on the hot seat in a broadcast studio or in a Weather Service office at the Weather Channel, when an event's coming, there are certain days when you go to work that you know, well, this is going to be an interesting day. It's going to be a challenge. Then there were days when you sat down and you realized that the next 8 hours could very well be a career-defining day for you. The atmosphere gives us lots of good, valuable information. Severe weather forecasting, and Mike was pointing this out in his show just a week or two ago. It has come a long ways from where it was. So we have those days where we know when these events are going to be coming, when we are pretty certain that the stronger variety of tornadoes is a distinct possibility. So why not tell people? Why not tell people what we know? If we know a tornado has been confirmed, or if it's still radar indicated, if we have an idea that that tornado may be of the stronger variety, why not tell folks? Because those are the killer tornadoes. It was interesting when we look back at the IBW demo when we started, and I'm not looking down because I wanted to get the facts here right. The central region of the Weather Service is basically 38 offices in the 14 Midwestern states, basically the north-central part of the U.S. from the Rockies east to the Great Lakes. Out of all the tornadoes that occurred from 2000 and get it right here, 2008 to 2012, 87% of those tornadoes went into storm data as an EF0 or an EF1 tornado, with 7 fatalities, and all of those were produced from the EF1 tornadoes. 13% of those tornadoes were EF2 or greater. They accounted for 262 fatalities. And so when we looked at the events after Joplin, we realized, you know, we're saying the very same thing for every single one of those storms. And there are days like Moore. There are days like Tuscaloosa. There are days like, events that occurred here in Greensburg, other places in the Midwest where you just know. You have the propensity of data which tells you as a warning forecaster something out of the ordinary is going to happen. So we tried to build a vehicle to communicate that.
Hey, let me, if you don't mind, let me ask, because Mike Smith had a direct criticism when it comes to impact-based warnings on the tornado emergency for Wichita, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just read what it said in the message. It says, you could be killed if not underground or in a tornado shelter. Complete destruction of neighborhoods, businesses, and vehicles will occur. Flying debris will be deadly to people and animals. And it goes on to say this is an extremely dangerous tornado with complete devastation likely. You could be killed if not underground. And so how would you respond to criticism of that? And you know, maybe Mike did have a point, because, you know, the Weather Service criticized some television meteorologists for saying that if you're not underground, you won't survive. How would you respond to Mike's criticism of that?
Well, you know, it's interesting, James. When we started this in 2012, we actually consulted with a group of people who focus in communication studies. And so our goal with working with those folks was, here's what we want to tell people. We want to communicate the following message to people. How would you say it? You're not a meteorologist. You don't have the background in the science that we do. You're not obsessed with telling everybody the storm has strong low-level rotation that might produce a tornado at some point. Getting it all scientifically right. What would you say? And so they gave us some wording that they thought would help to do that. The wording in 2012 did start off a little strong with the tornado emergency, but then again, when we came up with the concept of IBW, we really wanted to focus the tornado emergency down to a very rare, very exceedingly rare situation where indeed you were looking at a Moore or a Greensburg or a Tuscaloosa. It was clear and present danger that something extraordinary was happening. And, you know, Rick, I'll pick on you. You go back and you look at Moore after the events of 99 and 2013, and you read those impact statements, and it describes what the area was left like. It was, you know, utter devastation. Now, knowing that we are iterating on this demonstration, we have listened to people who have given us good feedback. Folks like Mike, folks like others have given good feedback on this demonstration and have led to a toning down of those impact statements. They don't read anything nearly as dire as they did. They're still fairly strong. You want them to be strong. In the case of a stronger tornado moving into a populated area, you do want to stress that that risk is there. If this storm hits, the most likely outcome will be that. But they do not say nearly the words that they did. We've been listening to a lot of folks doing research in this area. Joe Rittberger there at the University of Oklahoma wrote a real nice article in 2013, which helped us to modify the impact statements for the tornado emergency and what we call the considerable tag or the elevated IBW tag, where it's not quite the emergency level. It helped us to tone those words down and make it more focused, to make it more descriptive to where we do try to utilize consequence-based messaging to elicit a response, but not so strongly that it has the opposite effect and either paralyzes folks or just incites fear. The goal of IBW is not to scare people to take action. The goal is to inform.
Some of the
Is the
feedback.
idea of I'm sorry, one more question. I'll let Rick have it.
Go ahead.
Is there still advice coming from the Weather Service that you have to be underground to survive a tornado?
No, not at all. In fact, I'm frantically looking on my left screen. That's why I keep looking off camera to find the text that we modified it to this year, James. I'll find that here in just a moment. But that language is no longer present in any of the IBW warnings.
Okay, Rick, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Mike, some of the feedback Mike got on that when we became involved in the impact-based warnings last year. Was it last year?
Yeah.
I don't know. Time's all mixed up, but we felt very strongly that we didn't want that. We didn't really want that wording in there. I mean, we have issues here in the Oklahoma City metro area where that is often said on television, and you're going to die if you're not below ground, creating what I believe, in my personal, non-professional, off-work opinion, to be a hopeless situation for people. And if you don't give people hope, you have to tell people something. You've got to tell them. You can't just say do this or die. If you can't do this, then what else can you do? So we felt very strongly that we didn't want to use that wording in the impact-based warning, and I'm not saying we did it, but we were part of a group of voices that expressed concern. So that was one of the times where I almost ran off the road. That was just not true. I knew that wording is no longer in there, and I don't know of any office that's using anything like that. Certainly not in the IBW. And Mike can touch more on this maybe, but it's in all the offices that are doing the impact-based warnings. A large part of the warning text is kind of locked in. I mean, we can edit a few things, but a lot of it is locked in, and some of that locked-in text is that wording, because we want to have a common ground, a common base to compare from. I think, is that correct, Mike? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely, Rick. That is correct. And James, since you asked, I just wanted to read it here for you. So for the record, that everyone that looks at these IBW warnings this summer, they'll know exactly what they're going to hear. If our forecast offices do elevate the tornado warning into an IBW tier, if you will, they use a tag that says considerable, or the catastrophic, which is the tornado emergency. The words they'll hear are, "You are in a life-threatening situation. Flying debris may be deadly to those caught without shelter. Mobile homes will be destroyed. Considerable damage to homes, businesses, and vehicles is likely, and complete destruction is possible." It still paints a very serious picture. Does not say anything about having to be underground. Does not say anything about being unsurvivable. Simply tells people that this is the real deal. You should pay attention. Kind of like what Mike was alluding to when he talks about the Joplin storm and listening for those extraordinary signals, something that you've never heard before. That's what we're after here. Someone hears that and they go, ooh, this is different. People pay attention to different things. They investigate and take action. That's what we're after.
And I think it's good that we have gone finally through some social scientists and those that understand human behavior. Everybody around this table has been trained in physical science. I don't know anybody here that has any background in social science, so that's a good thing. Sorry, Nate. Sorry. Nate is our social scientist here.
Killing me here.
So now, and John, let me bring in John Scala, because you wanted to talk about this tornado emergency statement, right? And John, you were muted.
Not anymore, James. All my clocks are going off. That's why I'm muted. 10 o'clock here in the east.
It's 10 o'clock here in the east. Do you know where your children are?
Actually, I do. But
okay.
10 o'clock and all is well.
There you go. Well, Mike, the reason why I wanted to bring this subject up was the first time that the Weather Service used the term tornado emergency was the May 3rd, 99 outbreak. Mm-hmm. And I was covering that live for the Weather Channel, and I remember reading the statement when it came across and thinking, I've never read this before. So my reaction was probably what was intended. It immediately caught my eye, and I immediately put that on the air, and I said, this is something I haven't seen before. This is a dire situation, and you need to take immediate action. Now, we talked a little bit earlier on the show about consistency of comment and message. And what we're seeing right now, in my mind, is an inconsistency. We're finding that the private sector is using this terminology to describe any tornado event that may be going through a populated location. So it seems to me we are diluting the term tornado emergency.
Well, John, all good points. I will tell you this, under the construct of IBW, a forecaster that's trained in issuing these warnings is told that he or she has to have 4 criteria that are met. 1, tornadoes on the ground. There's no doubt about it. You can see it on live television. You have got spotters all over it telling you what's going on. Number 2, it's got to be moving into a population center. We don't give a predefinition of that because any population center is important in my mind. It doesn't have to be a city the size of Moore or Atlanta. It could be any city. The third is that it's forming on a day when all the atmospheric parameters are pointing to the fact that a strong to possibly violent tornado could be a likely outcome. It needs to be one of those moderate high-risk days where every signal is just blaring, red, red, red. And the fourth is got to be your goal is 100% POD and your false alarm rate is 0. Now, saying that, here's the challenge. Tornadoes, as we all know, are short-lived, micro-scale, mesoscale features. They behave unpredictably. One of the great success stories of the tornado emergency was the Greensburg, Kansas tornado back in '07. That kind of happened by accident. It was the unfavorable luck of that storm occluding at just the right spot that caused the tornado to turn north and enter the city of Greensburg that caused it to be struck. Had the storm waited 2 or 3 minutes to do that, would have been a situation similar to the one that Mike described in Wichita. And the interesting thing about the Wichita case of May of 2013 was that happened the day before Moore in a very similar environment, very similar mesoscale features. And in fact, the day that Moore happened, I was watching Rick in his office just working their tail off down there, and that tornado entered Moore and caused all that destruction. Then that storm kind of went through the same cycle that the Wichita storm did. It quit producing tornadoes. It moved across whatever boundary was there, and the tornado production ceased. We were very fortunate up in Wichita the day before that set up just to the southwest of town. And I mean literally just to the southwest of town, probably within a mile or 2. Had that not happened, that thing was on a beeline for downtown Wichita. You're sitting in that hot seat, what would you do? It's a tough call. But nonetheless, it is supposed to be, under IBW, it's supposed to be exceedingly, exceedingly rare. You shouldn't see those things but once every few years. We've tried to introduce this concept of the considerable tag that goes along with the IBW tornado warning to highlight a similar response, but not cry every whistle known to man that this is a Moore, this is a Tuscaloosa, this is a Joplin. Again, it's meant to inform and to give another risk signal, if you will, to the emergency manager, the broadcast meteorologist, to the public. Something unusual is going on, but that tornado emergency should be used in exceedingly rare situations.
So would you give counsel to forecasters? I'm just looking at, and this is Wikipedia, take it for what it is, there are 8 tornado emergencies in 2014 and a dozen each in 2013 and 2012. Is that too many? I mean, you're talking, what I'm hearing is might be 1 or 2 of these a year. It might be the Greensburg, Kansas. It might be the Moore, Oklahoma. And what I'm seeing here are a lot of tornadoes that are verifying EF0, EF1, EF0. I mean, there's some 3s and 4s and 5s, but I'm also seeing as many, if not more, 0s, 1s, and 2s. And don't get me wrong, I have never sat in the Weather Service hot seat and had to pull the trigger on a warning. So I'm not trying to be critical here, but it seems to me that if that is what you guys are saying at a headquarters level, I'm not sure that the folks at the front offices are here. Either they're hearing that message or they're taking it and running with it in their own direction, or what. And I'm worried, like John was, that maybe that it's new and shiny now. Back in the 50s, a tornado warning was new and shiny. It's not shiny anymore. It's certainly not as shiny as it used to be. What would you think about that notion that maybe we're putting too many of these out?
I think, Nate, that's exactly why we designed IBW the way that we did. Our concept behind it is that you should not pull that thing unless if the anecdotal advice I'd give a warning forecaster, I'd give myself sitting in the hot seat. If you're expecting to see the aftermath of a Moore or a Tuscaloosa or a Joplin when this thing hits the city, then put the thing out. Otherwise, don't. I mean, it really kind of boils down to that simple of a binary decision. and it happens exceedingly rarely, and it should for that reason. When Rick's office came up with that concept in '99, it was designed for just that purpose. This is an extraordinary day. You're going to see it once in a lifetime, although poor Moore sees it, once every 13, 14 years, unfortunately. It is a situation where we want people to use the message sparingly. Don't bring out the heavy ammunition unless you really need it, because you do want people to take action on tornado warnings. You want them to heed every warning. It's just when we have information that Rick knows when he's sitting there watching the radar, let's give him a vehicle to communicate that through an official product. He's got other means to do it as well: Facebook, Twitter, social media, web. But this is the way through the official warning that everyone on this team sees at once.
The guidance to our forecasters here, and I don't know, maybe we make it. Maybe I'm trying to oversimplify it, but I know there's a lot of hand-wringing in the Weather Service about, well, how do we know which one to issue? We tell our forecasters, if you have to stop and think, if you have a doubt in your mind about what kind of tornado warning to issue the lowest level. We went back and did a study, and probably 95% of the tornado warnings, if we had been issuing IBW all the way back to like 2010, like 95% of our warnings would have been the lowest plain vanilla level. So we tell our forecasters, if you have to think about it, if you don't know, then if you're in doubt, issue the lowest level, because you have to have, in my opinion, you need to have some evidence for even the considerable tag. And if you're going to do a tornado emergency, there should be no doubt in your mind that that's going to verify. Now, I don't want to be critical of offices, because it could be that this is a big, bad, nasty-looking tornado, and for whatever reason, there was only EF1 damage. I can't think of any recent examples where there was a big, 2.5, 3 mile wide tornado that was rated probably lower than it actually could have been as far as the impact. I'm being facetious, but that sometimes, I don't know the circumstances of all those situations to know for sure what the forecaster was seeing, hearing, what pictures he was seeing, what spotter reports he was getting. So I can't be critical of any of those emergencies, but in my mind, it's like Mike said, 0 false alarm rate, period.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, let me ask you guys a question. You say you only issue a tornado emergency if there is this large, violent tornado you're looking at moving into a population center. Is that not discriminatory against people that live in rural areas?
I don't know that I'd say that it's discriminatory, James, but the challenge there, and Rick was kind of mentioning some of the interesting events that we have up in my neck of the woods. There are large portions of my home state, I grew up in Kansas, that you could plunk a mile-wide tornado down for about 40 miles, and the best thing it's probably going to strike is some center pivot irrigation. There literally isn't much of anything out there. That's why we don't try to tell our forecasters, it has to be 1,000 people, or it has to be 10,000 people, or some magic number, because every life is important. I think that term tornado emergency has the greatest applicability when you're really talking about a concentration of people at a location, be it an event or a city or a town. Rural areas, I grew up in the country. I think rural folks are pretty savvy when it comes to the weather, and that certainly helps. And within IBW, we do have the construct for the warning to be of an elevated tier, if you will, an elevated set of words that actually match the tornado emergency in terms of the impact statement. But again, I guess that tornado emergency term really, to me, just sticks at a concentration of people for where you have a much higher risk of loss of life than you might typically have out in maybe more open spaces.
And if
it doesn't prevent someone from doing a core emergency either for rural spaces, James. I do want to say that, but
okay. And while we're talking about this, explain what goes behind the issuance of a flash flood emergency and a severe thunderstorm emergency.
Well, I've never heard the term severe thunderstorm emergency before, so that's a new one.
Didn't we have a PDS severe thunderstorm warning issued this past month?
If it was something, well, as far as I know, it's nothing official or from headquarters. I mean, it may have been something that a local office made up, but I'd never heard of that before.
Because, we have a derecho type thing, and you've got widespread winds of 120 miles an hour plus. and that might be a situation where that's needed. Now, I just assumed there was such a thing, and I can't recall of a specific case. So there's no severe thunderstorm emergency within the Weather Service structure then, but there is a flash flood emergency. I've seen those many times.
I'm getting confused with the PDS tornado warning. My mistake.
So what goes behind a flash flood? Like Louisville issued one last week. What goes on behind that?
Well, again, James, I think, and again, it's not within our impact-based warning demonstration, but similar in vein to the way that Norman came up with the tornado emergency back in the late 1990s. Situation where you've got an extraordinary amount of rain in a very small area that will cause flash flooding of the likes that you might not see in a lifetime. We had a situation like that in Kansas City back in 1998 and just east of the Country Club Plaza, killed over a dozen people there. Was an extraordinary event with 8 to 9 inches of rain in maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours time. Now, back then we didn't use those terms. We didn't have that type of wording set to put in a warning, but that would be the type of situation where that term has grown from, very similar to the way the tornado emergency term grew from what happened in Norman. You're expecting that extraordinarily rare flash flood event that the water is going to rise exceedingly rapidly and affect areas that you typically don't see flooding in.
Looking in the Weather Service directives here to see if I can find a technical definition of it, because we've never done one here. I guess we've come close, but we've never done one.
Well,
but,
let me
I'll find it. I'll let you.
The derecho that came through the Shenandoah Valley and also the D.C. Baltimore area in 2012, I believe it was.
Yeah. June 3rd.
You know, those were, no, I was actually traveling that day. I was not working. I was on the road, and I got the severe thunderstorm warning, and I noticed that the severe thunderstorm warnings were issued for a duration of over an hour. I think it was almost close to 90 minutes, and the warning was issued well in advance of the actual line of storms that was coming through. So as a forecaster, I knew something was odd, but to an average viewer who might have been getting those warnings, they got a severe thunderstorm warning, which we get every year. What would your thoughts be on that kind of situation? What kind of wording?
Well, in the severe thunderstorm warnings within the IBW, Aubrey, we do have impact statements as well that do ramp up considerably from, your quarter and 60 type of situation to a better than baseball or higher than 80 mile an hour type of a wind event. And they do describe the most likely outcome that this storm would have, and I can certainly find those words here for you as well, just have them right in front of me. For, say, 100 mile an hour or higher, a derecho event like you described, the wording in the warning would say, you're in a life-threatening situation. Flying debris may be deadly to those caught without shelter. Mobile homes will be destroyed. Expect considerable damage to homes and businesses and extensive tree damage and power outages, to try to describe it. By the same token, you also have one of the challenges of the severe thunderstorm warning for us anyway, and I think Rick would probably agree, is that they cover everything. They cover everything from the quarter and 60 kind of situation all the way up to 100 mile an hour. So how to distinguish that? Right. One of the things that John Ferree, our severe weather program manager down there in Norman for the Weather Service, he's working on is building a tool within the impact-based warning construct that if our forecasters are expecting winds of a certain magnitude, maybe 90 or 100 mile an hour, or they're expecting hail upwards of softball size or something you see exceedingly rare, there will be a tag put at the bottom of the severe thunderstorm warning that will, in turn, activate the wireless emergency alerts, the alerts that people get on their cell phones, the extraordinary signal, again, that we're after. Severe thunderstorm warnings don't go out over WEA. And like you said, Aubrey, they are very indistinguishable from one another. But an extraordinary signal like the phone activating and telling you 100 mile an hour winds are coming your way might be enough to get people's attention and give them some heads up that something like that's about to happen. That's just one of the challenges we've had, I think, in this community for many, many years.
By the way, this is a case study here of a PDS severe thunderstorm warning. This is issued by the National Weather Service in Jackson, May 3rd, 2009.
Okay, and that's very similar to some of the wording that is in the IBW.
And I think that was a Southern region experiment, a kind of a localized kind of a Jackson, Birmingham, if I recall. I don't remember. I know there was a cluster of offices down in the
southern
southeast
region.
that were.
Yeah, it's out of the southern region. I can tell by looking at where this is coming from. But I was not aware there was a PDS severe thunderstorm warning.
Mm-hmm.
See, you'll learn a lot on this show.
Well,
So-
in my
Hey,
question,
let me ask you a question of both Rick and Mike. Have we in the television industry been guilty of proclaiming a tornado emergency on the air when the Weather Service did not issue one? And I'll just say this: to my knowledge, and again, I work a lot of severe weather. To my knowledge, the only time I did it without looking or consulting with Weather Service chat was the Tuscaloosa tornado. When the wedge was on the live stream in northeast Greene County, about 35 minutes out, I said, this is a tornado emergency. I didn't look, I didn't ask, and I could see where that could be a problem looking back on it. But has that been a problem in other markets, to your knowledge?
Evidently, it happened here on March 25th. I don't think I was aware of it in real time, but one of our local TV meteorologists declared a tornado emergency with that tornado and wind, strong winds going through the city of Oklahoma City and more on March 25th. I don't think I realized it in real time, but that's the only time I'm ever aware of that it's happened without us saying it.
And you guys, look, you have to think about this show. You need to be critical of us. You guys be critical of us. I mean, I'm not so sure, looking back on that was a wise thing to do. I could have said other things. All I was thinking in my mind was, if you have a friend or a relative or a college student in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Northport, you call them now. You text them now. I needed urgency. I needed to kick it up a notch, and I probably didn't need to do that. Now, looking back on it, they did that anyway, and I think everybody realized that was the right thing to do. But I think what I need to do in the future is to leave that alone and let the Weather Service handle that. And if you issue a tornado emergency, then we call it that. I'm not so sure you need some bonehead TV guy stepping in doing what you're trying to do. And
well, that worked out very well in that case, and I would say kudos. Anything we can do to get the word out, then thank you for doing it. And if it beats us by 5 minutes, that's fine. That's clearly a situation where that's exactly what Mike was describing in his. You didn't have those criteria in your head when you did it, but you knew what you needed to say and do, and that's fine. I think it's different when we have storms of lesser intensity that don't meet that criteria, whether you know the criteria or not. And I personally, I just think we need that needs to be, in case of emergency, break glass and 2 people turn the key to launch the missile. And we just start throwing that out there every time there's a tornado anywhere. Then we're going to have to come up with another word instead of emergency, and I don't know what that'll be.
Yeah, James, you bring up an interesting point that I think is certainly worthy of discussion and to ponder, and that is we all are on the integrated warning team. We are all degree meteorologists looking at the same type of data, looking at the same environment. If you feel strongly that the situation has changed, that type of a heightened wording or that heightened message is there, and you have someone, obviously that's the big thing too, you have somebody there that's in the studio that can help put that into chat, engage with other members of the IWT, let's make it a collective decision. The interesting thing from the IBW warning decisions where they've decided to use the tags in the Central Region offices anyway, it was always a group decision. It was not something that, I'll just pick on John since he just picked up on my screen. It's not something John just decided, I'm going to do, do, and click his buttons and off he goes. Everyone in the office kind of gathered up and said, I think this is what we should do. Yes, I think this is absolutely what we should do. The more teamwork, the more opinions, the better. It helps strengthen our resolve. And again, going back as far as the Lubbock tornado of 1970, consistency of message, so important in eliciting proper response from the people who receive information from us.
Well, and here's my question, and this is almost to everyone, to the entire panel. What if, when people are not watching TV, when they're not watching us, the text alerts they get on their phone, what are they saying in your area? Because I know for a severe thunderstorm warning, let's say with the potential of 95 to 100 mile an hour winds, all it says is a severe thunderstorm warning has been issued for your area. Is anyone else's text alerts that are going out more defined?
I mean,
Well, and the next question is, does the tornado emergency need its own header? Because it's still TOR, right? Same header.
Yeah, it's the same header, and if you were updating a tornado warning to include the tornado emergency, and that's often what happens, an office will issue a non-tornado emergency warning, and then the evidence comes in, and they update that warning with the severe weather statement. Then that information can get even more buried, and a severe weather statement does not automatically alarm weather radio. It's not going to activate wireless emergency alert system or the EAS or anything like that. And we've actually talked with the state of Oklahoma and the EAS entry point here that we have some unofficial things laid out where if we had another situation where we have a provision now where we can activate the wireless emergency alerts if we had a situation like that where we had a tornado warning that became a tornado emergency, but there is no automated provision for that right now.
So you have a backdoor to the WEA system. That's interesting.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, in all reality, I think Rick raises a very good point, and that is something that I've tried to encourage our offices to do. We haven't set policy for it, but issuing that fresh tornado warning, if you are going to up the ante to that stronger message, is a good idea. It, again, communicates another level of unusual activity, something different. It does activate weather radio. It does activate the wireless emergency alerts. It does get the message out there a little bit broader. But come back to your message there, your question, Aubrey. It's so difficult when you're limited to 140 characters or less, be it Twitter,
Exactly.
be it an SMS message. There's only so much you can say. The one thing I do like about NWS Chat and the way that the guys have written the code in that is that with the IBW warnings, it will highlight the tags for you. So if you're just having to glance over real quick while you're doing a live break-in, your person that's kind of helping you is looking at the screen, they can quickly shout off those very factual facts to you. And while no one has bought into it yet with regards to displays, it is something that I've talked with some of the local TV Mets here in the Kansas City area. You could, in theory, look for those tags in your software to be able to code a warning a different color, make it flash, make it be outlined a different way. Or if you're live doing a 30-second bump, here are the tornado warnings, and in fact, here are the ones with confirmed tornadoes, and here are the two that the Weather Service and everyone's talking about as being the most intense. Then we'll be back with you in 2 minutes.
I'm pretty sure that the Gibson Ridge software does that, at least with the tornado emergencies and confirmed tornadoes, spotter confirmed. I don't know. I'm sure he's using the tags, but at one point he was also scanning the warning text, looking for phrases like, spotter has confirmed and that sort of thing. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, but it is there, and that's one way that they can do that. John?
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I don't want to lose track of the fact that we're still dealing with a portion of the public that is perhaps not quite as educated as we would like them to be, particularly outside of the plains, in those regions that are more prone to severe weather. And I can tell you several times I've been criticized for not breaking in to the regular programming to issue a warning. It's not my responsibility, obviously. But I think we need to refocus a little bit and perhaps even educate the public again about what the purpose of the National Weather Service is.
Good point, John, and I think that also kind of lends back to the comment James had earlier about maybe these really unique messages should be under different headers, under different flags. I think complexity probably makes it more complicated to follow. The education is a big part of it. Automation, I think, to some degree can also be a big part of it, especially as we get this thing running, hopefully, across the country here in the next year or so. If all of our offices are actually doing something consistently, and this is something our director talks a lot about, that consistency helps everyone on this integrated warning team be more effective. They don't have to parse text like Nate was saying. They can look for a specific tag, a specific thing in that warning that tells them each time what that means.
So let's talk about the rollout of the impact-based warnings. Central region, you guys have been using it for a while. In our CWA here, they just kicked in like this month. When is the goal for a national rollout of impact-based warnings?
Well, I think, James, the goal, if you will, would be next year. There is a very important function that's going on right now, and that is we have spent the better part of the first 2 seasons of IBW having social scientists, people who aren't meteorologists, coming in and giving us feedback from emergency managers and broadcast meteorologists, typically the people get their warnings from. The public generally gets their warnings from an intermediary source. We focused on those the first 2 years. Had some good feedback, some good information. A group now this year will be contracted to study the public. When you look at the public, it's, as Nate would tell you from a social science standpoint, there are many publics, and all of them have different degrees of education, different degrees of background, different experiences, all kinds of different things. So what they're hoping to do is to utilize some examples of what we're doing now, some examples of some different maybe thoughts or ideas, and get some qualitative and quantitative feedback. Does it seem to help? Certainly does. Certainly, the question and answer does it hurt? So far, we found no evidence that it does. One of my favorite quotes the other day was that it was an unmitigated disaster. I'm not aware that it has been really any different than it's been in any part of the country in terms of the success of the warning program. I think it's actually, from the emergency manager standpoint, has been much more helpful. But we do want to listen to those social scientists, and we want our new offices in the southern and eastern parts of the country to give feedback. We'll iterate this thing. Nothing is perfect when you roll it off the assembly line, and if it is, it's out 10 years too late. We want to iterate this thing, get it right, and it will evolve as we move it along. But the goal is, if all of those things come back with good information that says, yes, no harm is done, you're having successes in these areas, some things to tweak in others, the goal is to look for doing this nationwide next year. That's the one goal that John Ferree has under his job as the Severe Weather Program Manager, is to conduct that evaluation, make sure those things line up, and then we would be getting it out across the country in 2016.
In terms of evaluation, up until this point, Mike, how have the IBWs that have been issued up until this point, both in terms of severe thunderstorm and tornado warnings, how have they verified? In terms of, do we find that we have skill at doing this and documented skill that can be proven?
Absolutely, and a great question, Nate. I'm just calling up, and of course, the one thing you're looking for is never on the front of your computer screen when you want it. From 2012 to 2013, we looked at our offices here in the central region, and to just give you some construct, that would have involved 823 tornado warnings issued over those 2 years, and that includes, if we, like Rick was describing earlier, if we upgraded or downgraded in a severe weather statement, and 465 tornado events. And so here's some interesting statistics. So across the central region, and the false alarm issue has been a challenge. I think everyone on this meeting and everyone probably listening to it knows that that's one of our greatest challenges. False alarm rate across central region in both of those years was 67%, a little below the national average, but still quite high. When we looked at the warnings that were just issued with the elevated tags, where the forecaster had the confidence to put the considerable tag in there or higher, false alarm rate dropped to 26%. Those warnings verified 75% of the time with a 26% false alarm rate. And it's not a real surprise that a lot of the social science feedback that came back from the focus groups and such said that to the emergency manager, it was an indication of confidence more than it was of severity. And that was a very interesting finding. So we can't stop issuing tornado warnings on tornadoes. I mean, as a meteorologist, that would just be blasphemous to make such a statement, and is certainly well beyond the state of the science to distinguish the actual intensity of a tornado developing or ongoing. But we have shown skill at being able to look at the days where we can separate the wheat from the chaff. Some excellent research work that's being done at SPC by Brian Smith, Rich Thompson, and a host of others on rotational velocities and conditional tornado probabilities. Some fascinating research being done in the dual pole regime by Chet Entremont at Jackson, Mississippi, and others. Are telling us that there is data we can mine from the AD&AD. There is data we can mine from mesoscale analysis. We can make those distinctions, and all of us that have worked in a severe weather event can easily remember certain days from others. There are just certain days where the atmosphere is primed and hummed and ready to go, and others where yeah, today's a great day to put Rick on the radar because I don't want to ruin my warning stats.
Wow, just throw Rick under the bus. So,
Nicely done.
it's interesting though that this is the angle that instead of because originally, the way these are worded, it's worded based on impact. It's not worded based on confidence.
That's correct.
And while I appreciate that that's what the emergency managers are taking away from it, there's a disconnect between the way they're taking it and perhaps the way that it's being issued, the way the products are being created, and just on their face what they're being called. I hear catastrophic, and like you said, I don't want to say if I'm expecting a zero false alarm rate, but I'm expecting 26% for something that's supposed to be a slam dunk.
Bear in mind, Nate, that's looking at any of the warnings that have either the considerable tag or the catastrophic. And the catastrophic is the tornado emergency. So they are lumped into one bin, if you will, for the verification work that we did. So the tornado emergencies, I guess it depends on how you validate one of those. It probably did go as an 0 for 3 in our first 2 years because the first 2 that were to strike the city of Wichita didn't. And there was one that was issued up in South Dakota on a rather interesting storm that didn't quite pan out the way we thought that would either. The notion, though, being that if you get a warning with a tornado damage threat tag of any type, pretty much telling you that your false alarm rate drops by almost 50%, is a pretty significant statistic. The question you had asked was, do we show skill at being able to do this? And I think anecdotally, all of us probably can think back over the last 20 years. On big severe weather days, yeah, it's like shooting ducks in a barrel. And other days, it's like shooting a fly off the wall at 50 yards with a BB gun. Much more difficult. And so those easy days when we have the warnings where we can make our money, that's where we can use some of those science tools, those research tools, to have better insight. Is it perfect? No. Yeah. Tornado warnings aren't perfect. Haven't been and never will be.
Hey, would you run on these tags?
Hold on, I got another question. In terms of, you mentioned the research work that's been done with emergency managers, and I've had an opportunity to hear some of that firsthand, and I think some of it's going to be presented at our conference here in Raleigh in June. James, there's your cue to tell everybody to drink. I haven't seen any published research anyway, or presented research that addresses feedback from broadcast meteorologists. Is that published? Is it going to be published? Is it going to be presented? How formal? I know the research, and I know this because one of the people doing the research was on my master's committee, Vermont. So I know that the emergency managers are being surveyed in a very organized way. Has the feedback been received from or solicited from broadcasters the same way, and is it being weighed with the same weight? Because I mean, there's a sense. Well, I'll come back to that, but I'll let you answer that first.
Sure. It has been shared, Nate. It hasn't been shared in formal published journals, probably the way that I wish they had been. In 2012, for the 2012 year, Burl and others, Ken Gallupi and others, were involved in looking at IBW from the context of both the broadcast meteorologist and the EMs. In 2013, we worked with a group called Sea Grant, which is a NOAA extension agency that works primarily along the coast, but they also have a presence in the Great Lakes, and they did a wonderful job at looking at it. Focus groups were conducted with broadcast Mets and with emergency managers. And feedback was gathered. Those were presented at the AMS conference, the annual conference in 2013, and again in 2014. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to make the NWA conference for the last couple of years. I haven't, but I'm certainly hoping to bring some more of that to the NWA conference in October, and again to the AMS conference in January. And Ken and others will bring some of that to the conference there in Raleigh. It is important. One of the interesting distinctions was, and this is something that the Sea Grant folks found and published in the report we asked for them, that broadcast meteorologists and emergency managers both found good utility in the information provided, and it was the meteorologists at the Weather Service who felt that maybe this information wouldn't be useful to those groups. So that was kind of an interesting finding, that the people who are receiving the information were saying, yes, we appreciate this, and the folks issuing it saying, well, I just don't know that they really want it. But sometimes that happens. Sometimes it is kind of a razor's edge to try to figure out what it is that people want to know versus what you think they want to know.
Gotcha.
So, one quick question again. Run down the categories, if you would, Mike, and the impact-based warnings, just for those of us that are new to this.
Sure. Well, still 2 warnings, severe thunderstorm and tornado. So there are no 5 tiers of warnings. There are just 2, severe thunderstorm and tornado. Within the severe thunderstorm warning, the tags that are there are to indicate hail magnitude and wind magnitude. And on the rare event that you don't have the confidence to issue a tornado warning, but you still want to highlight the potential, there is a tornado possible tag that you can use to indicate to decision makers, you know, we're watching this thing. It might happen, but it's pretty slim chance. If it does, we really don't want to hit all the bells and whistles to let you know, but we want you to know we're watching it. Go to the tornado warning. Tornado warning exists as is. If the forecaster believes that that storm has a likelihood of producing a more impactful tornado, again, it's not an EF scale forecasting exercise, but if the propensity of evidence suggests that if a tornado forms, this thing may be of a stronger variety, you have the option of using a tag that says tornado damage threat considerable. And that invokes an impact statement very similar to that of the tornado emergency to heighten the wording, to heighten the awareness. And then the tornado emergency exists as the only other level above that, and that's the catastrophic tag. That's the one that you should hopefully never see in your lifetime in any particular area of the U.S. As we were talking earlier, should be used in exceedingly rare situations. In the 2 years that we looked at this in Central Region, I don't have the 2014 numbers in front of me, but it was a pretty quiet year aside from about a week in Nebraska back in June. We issued those tagged warnings with a considerable or catastrophic, either one. I believe it was 8% of all of our warnings out of Central Region. And there were only, gosh, I don't think last year we had, in 2014, we didn't have any catastrophic tags in Central Region. I think the only ones that were issued in 2014 were issued by the Jackson, Mississippi office on the storm that moved there across portions of eastern Mississippi there just to the south of Starkville.
I have a question.
And does the forecasters have a lot of leeway? Can they insert their own text, or do they have to run the material that you've already got in the can?
We want them to use the material that's already in the can for one reason: consistency. People are mobile. They go various places around the country. Hearing a consistent message, we feel, and this is what our social science folks that helped, our communication experts that advised us on this, helped us to come to grips with. No matter whether you're in Pennsylvania or you are in Kansas or you are in Texas, hearing similar messages helps you to react similarly to the way you would if you were at home. And so we are trying to keep that fairly tight. And as Rick mentioned, a lot of the warning is boilerplate information.
I have a question about the considerable warning. So it's considerable and then catastrophic?
Correct.
Okay. And this kind of goes back to my husband and I, over the last week, he's reading menu items, fancy items. He, thinks of ways to simplify it. So when we see clouds in the sky and I say, oh, that's scattered alphacumulus, he's like, no, that's fluffy clouds. Ways to simplify it. Considerable, to me, would it not be better to say major? Do you think people are responding to the considerable if that's actually should be a major type of event just under catastrophic?
Not bad feedback, Aubrey. We actually started in year 1 with the word significant. And got feedback, especially from the emergency management community, that meant something to them that was actually less than what we were intending them to hear, to see. So words do have meaning. Are the tags considerable and catastrophic the right ones? Perhaps, perhaps not. That's another reason to iterate and to look and to ask questions and to take feedback and good input. Yours as well. It helps us to iterate it. We do need to all pick the same thing. It would be a shame if Rick and Norman decided to use major, and I don't know, James and his folks down there in Birmingham decided to use some other word like significant or slight or something else. Then people are kind of like, what the heck's going on? We're kind of back to the same thing we've always been at.
I think it's important too to note, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but considerable is kind of the internal tag for us in the Weather Service. That's the menu item that we choose from in the warning generation software. It's also the tag that appears at the bottom. So the very bottom of a warning, say tornado damage threat, it'll say either considerable or catastrophic. In the body of the warning, it doesn't say considerable anywhere, I don't think.
Okay.
I think that the wording is damaging tornado if we have a considerable tag. So
Yeah.
considerable is kind of the label that we have on it, but it's not
Okay.
something that actually appears in the body of the warning.
Well, that would make sense, especially as a viewer. I don't know that I would take considerable as a life-threatening situation or something that I needed to take seriously.
Right.
There was a member of my PhD thesis committee who would not sign off on my dissertation because I used the term significant. He wanted a statistical relationship if I was going to use the word significant. So I actually had to go through my thesis and get rid of it. But my question is, to go back to what Nate was commenting on, I think he raised a really interesting question, and that is the current nomenclature, if the end user, the public, and you can define public however you want, if that end user is making an assessment of risk based on the content of the warning, rather than realizing that a warning is a warning and you need to react, we're going down a road we don't want to go. We're asking the end user that doesn't have the knowledge and the experience, we're asking them to don't make an assessment of this, but they're doing that anyway. That's really disconcerting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things, John, when we first did IBW back in 2012, and the reason to date that the focus has been on the broadcast meteorologist and the emergency manager is that so often it's the intermediary resource that people are getting their information from. They're getting it from Aubrey, they're getting it from James, they're getting it from Kevin. They're not getting it directly from Rick or from me. I should say, Nate, you too. Don't want to leave you out. They're getting it from that intermediary source. Getting us all kind of singing to the same sheet of music, if you will, is one of the goals of IBW. And so you're exactly right. Folks are going to crowdsource. They're going to go look, and they're going to turn the channel on and watch what Aubrey's saying. They're going to turn the channel on and see what Nate's saying, putting you all hypothetically in the same market. If you all are saying the same thing, that kind of thing happens very quick. We aren't. That kind of thing takes on a whole other meaning, and it takes a lot longer for people to make a determination of risk. And this concept called the risk paradigm, which is something that we really modeled IBW around, kind of looks at characterizing the hazard, characterizing the potential impacts, and then the communication piece. And it's that communication piece we really tried to focus on, because that's the part that's been a bit of a challenge for us over the years.
All right, I tell you what, we're looking at the clock here. We got to stop very quickly. I don't see a Tony Rice astronomy report this week, but we've got Brian's Professor Peters. We'll come back with Aubrey's email segment. I know Nate has to leave a little early. Nate, have you got news for us tonight?
I do not. There is no news, although please pass on my pick of the week when the time comes. That's news enough for everybody.
All right, well, let's do the recorded segments. We'll be right back as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
Measuring our atmosphere is a challenge, since the atmosphere is always in a state of change. One of the oldest methods to sample our environment is the radiosonde, which has been in use for over 60 years. Another instrument for measuring wind is the wind profiler, a type of weather-observing equipment that uses radar or sound waves to detect the wind speed and direction at various elevations above the ground. Readings are typically made at each kilometer above sea level, up to the extent of the troposphere, something between 8 and 17,000 kilometers above mean sea level. Above this level, there is an inadequate water vapor present to produce a radar bounce. The data synthesized from wind direction and wind speed is very useful to meteorological forecasting and timely reporting for flight planning. A 12-hour history of data is usually available where profilers exist. Profilers operate on the same principle as Doppler radar. In a typical implementation, the radar can sample along each of 5 beams. 1 is aimed vertically to measure vertical velocity, and 4 are tilted off vertical and oriented orthogonal to one another to measure the horizontal components of the air's motion. Like Doppler radar, small amounts of energy are bounced back to the profiler from turbulent eddies, and the Doppler frequency shift is used to calculate the speed of the air. A profiler's ability to measure wind is based on the assumption that the turbulent eddies that induce scattering are carried along by the mean wind. Just another amazing tool used in the field of meteorology to observe our atmosphere. If you have a weather question, you can drop a note to question@weatherbrains.com.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
This show's being done April 6, 2015, and it looks like got some active weather. Looks like Mike and Rick and Kev, you guys might have some severe weather in coming days.
If you read social media, it sure sounds that way.
Destruction.
I just changed my pick of the week. We'll talk about it in a second, but I think we do have a potential for some severe weather, especially Wednesday here in our area and down into Kevin's area in North Texas, Oklahoma. It's kind of one of those early season events with a dry line and lots of energy. I think we'll probably see a higher risk area based on the volume of reports, maybe up into Missouri, up toward Mike's way. But we've seen that situation before, and always caution people not to get too hung up on, just because there's a moderate or a high risk over there doesn't mean your storms aren't going to be just as bad. So we're going to have a lot of ingredients here in place on Wednesday. And I did vacuum out my tornado shelter over the weekend, so there you go,
I saw
Nate.
that. You said there are no spiders left, right?
I hope not. They may be back by now, but my wife will let me know if there are, if they have to use it. But,
Kevin, is your tornado shelter vacuumed out, Kevin?
You know what? We have, since we just moved here, we don't have one yet, and we're looking at two different options. I'm kind of interested in this tornado pod. There's a guy he's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and have you talked to this guy, James? Tornado pod?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know.
His
it rings
dad
a
came
bell.
up. Yeah, his dad came up with the idea after the big 2011 deal there in Alabama, and he came up with it because he's, I guess, fairly severely claustrophobic. And what he didn't want was to be in a shelter, in his garage, one of these underground things, and have the house fall down, and for him to be trapped for, some hours before somebody could get to him. So this thing is a steel cage surrounded by some sort of a poly resin thing that he's actually, I think this month, he's supposed to be at Texas Tech at the wind research facility out there getting this thing tested. In fact, we should probably just get him on the show. But it looks kind of like a mushroom, and about half of it is underground and anchored with cement, some sort of a cement footing, and then the top, the mushroom part, actually rotates and turns so that you can then move the top, or what would essentially be the door, out from under any debris and get out. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Very cool. All right, and Mike, what are you expecting up there your way this week?
Hail and fire and brimstone, and no.
Where's fire and brimstone in the official warning stuff?
That's next year's demonstration.
Oh, good.
No, it does look awfully active. We were talking about that this afternoon here around our regional operations center, and I know our offices are gearing up, especially those, as Rick mentioned. It looks like Wednesday, Kansas, Missouri, and then moving east at. It's good to get into the cadence of spring. You hate to see the impacts of severe weather, but it's good to get into the cadence of spring.
Did you guys, while I was away, get into the Outlook terminology, this new marginal and enhanced? Did you address that at all? What kind of feedback you guys getting, Mike?
We didn't discuss that on the call. So far, from my perspective, not a lot of feedback. I know our local offices, one of our local offices developed a real nice tool that made its way around social media to try to explain the different levels. We've had some interesting discussions at some of the state emergency management meetings that a lot of our warning coordination meteorologists have been going to. No specific feedback yet that I'm really aware of. Nothing quantifiable, so to speak.
Okay. All right, good deal. Well, I tell you what. Let's see here. Oh, boy. We never have enough time because Kevin's got to go and I've got to go. But we got some email to go. I know that Aubrey has an email inbox that just might be close to being full.
We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
That's right. We have some letters, and we have a listener response from Craig Buchanan from Stillwater, Oklahoma, and we thank you for sending that in. Craig is more of has an interest on the social side of weather, so he likes the episodes heavily on the human side of weather, which I think we all agree is fascinating and really kind of makes us think a little bit more about what we do. At least personally, that's how I take it. As far as the episodes, it really depends on what we are doing, but he's interested in real-time mesoscale weather on a daily basis. So weather, of course, very important. So thank you, Craig, who is a grad student, and we appreciate you listening. Also had an email from Taylor Stone, who has some interesting, well, there's a nice article on here, but also some interesting hashtags on climate change, but also some other guest suggestions. Let's see. Another show idea would be Dr. Steve Ackerman, director of the Cooperative Institute for Meteorological Satellite Studies and professor of meteorology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And he has a link that Dr. Ackerman presented. And another show idea is Lee Orff, professor of atmospheric science at Central Michigan University, which focuses more on severe weather and including tornadoes and downbursts. So we thank you for sending in that email. Some really good suggestions and links in there, and also some good show suggestions. So we'll have to forward those to Bill if he ever comes back.
He's done. So somebody really made the guy mad.
All the email said was I'm out tonight. And the hangout test was okay. And let's see. Nate responded to an email about a question about the new SPC forecast terminology, and I believe the office, I want to say it was St. Louis, but I could be wrong, where that really good graphic came out of, kind of a 1 through 5
yeah, it was Kansas City. Yeah. Kansas
City, okay.
It was, yeah.
And that was a great graphic. Maybe we can post that on the website, because that really kind of gave a nice 1 through 5 categorical.
Here it is. Can you see that?
Yeah, great representation of the new categories, and you know, like an F4, F5 tornado, or like a Category 3 or 2 hurricane. It really puts that more into perspective. So that's a great graphic. So if you have an email, a guest suggestion, or maybe someone that you think we would love to talk to, you can send that to email@weatherbrains.com. Oh, there's the basketball game. Dr. John.
Stop sharing.
You can send that to us, email@weatherbrains.com, and also find us on the Twitter. You can find us on the Facebook. We love to hear your opinions, suggestions, and we really like to get those links in and to have those conversations. And of course, Dr. John always loves to give you his wonderful answers.
Thank you, Robert.
All right, good deal. Yeah, I got an email from Tony Rice. It says he dropped an astronomy report in there, and it's not there in the old Dropbox. And Tony, if you're listening on WeatherBrains 480, WB 480, I've got the Fog Bank and the WeatherBrains 101, but no astronomy reports. So, but I tell you what, I've got to go in a second. So we're going to roll the Fog Bank, and Dr. John, I'll let you, or I know Kevin's got to go. You or Aubrey can fight over who runs the show for the rest of this year to do Picks of the Week. We're going to do the Fog Bank, and we're going to come back with the Picks of the Week as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Established. Hello, WeatherBrains listeners. This is David Phillips, Skydaver on Twitter. You can find these picks at skydaver.blogspot.com. First up, I've got a nice winter sunset photo at Earth Science Picture of the Day. JB would have loved this one. Fellow Weather Partners posted a video of tornado damage from the March 25th storm in Moore, Oklahoma. They also have a video on the Storm Prediction Center's 4 to 8 convective outlook changes that went into effect in December of 2014. The Memphis Weather Blog had an interesting post back in February about disappearing snow. Finally, a short apology to AccuWeather. Motorola Android phones have a nice widget called Command Center, and that widget includes a weather button. The button, however, is often way out of date, showing sunshine well after sunset or rainy conditions when it's sunny out. When you press that button, the widget goes full screen, and that screen shows a tab that reads AccuWeather.com. I thought that part of the widget was by AccuWeather, but it's not. I apologize for ranting at AccuWeather about that widget. However, the actual AccuWeather app isn't anything they should be proud of. First, it uses location services, which is fine, but they are way off on the address they show. If they're going to show an address, they should at least show the margin of error for the location. For me, they're off by a complete full street, over 400 feet away, and they show an address that doesn't even exist. Fix that, or just stop. Their minutecast is as bogus as their 45-day forecast. This morning, they told me that the rain that wasn't falling would continue for another 47 minutes. Later on, they told me that the rain would come in 75 minutes, which didn't happen. Right now, I'm being told that rain will start in 97 minutes. This kind of faked accuracy helps no one. If you're going to fake precision, why not tell me that the rain will start in 97 minutes, 37.45 seconds? AccuWeather, you didn't deserve my scorn for the Command Central widget, but you deserve double for your crap app. You are damaging your brand. Thanks for listening. Skydiver out.
Interface complete.
Okay, I have a comment before we continue. Is it not Meteorology 101 that you do not specify the rain will start at 2 o'clock? I mean, this is why I think, just to carry on, but that's why I think we have problems sometimes. Well, you said it was going to rain at 2 o'clock. It didn't rain at 2 o'clock.
I agree. Sometimes we are the victim of our own success. Well, at this point, Mike, did anybody mention to you that a pick of the week is something that we do at the end of the show?
No, they have not.
Oh, that was nice.
we need to fire Bill.
That's right. Well, what we normally do, Mike, is at this point in the program, everyone offers a web link or access to some story, article, weather-related phenomenon that we can share on our webpage, on the WeatherBrains webpage, and that's available there for all of our viewers and listeners to take a look at. So we'll come back to you at the end and give you an opportunity to
I can give you one right now.
Oh, you're on, man. Go ahead.
It would be weather.gov/impacts. It is the forward-facing page that we put together to explain in more detail the IBW demonstration. So it's weather.gov/impacts.
Excellent. How appropriate.
Absolutely. Improvisation was my minor in college.
Good. Rick Smith, pick of the week from you, sir.
Mine is a blog post that just came out this afternoon on the Vane with Dennis Mercereau, I think is how you pronounce his name. Title of it is "Don't Fall for Weather Hoaxes and Hype" as we head into tornado season. Mm-hmm. And good stuff, just common sense advice is stuff that we all the weather brains here, I think, subscribe to and preach and try to beat people over the head with. But one of his key sentences is you should always be suspicious of weather information you see on Facebook and Twitter, especially if the information sounds too good or too scary to be true. And it's that time of year we're going to be seeing a lot of scary stuff. So I recommend that, highly recommend that blog post.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Aubrey, how about you? Pick of the week.
Mine is actually, and let me see if I can screen share this before. That's what I came home to. Of course, everyone knows I was on my honeymoon last week. We got there a little squeaky lobster, and my pick of the week is a link about the Cape Hatteras U.S. Bureau Weather Station and how the Titanic SOS, the first SOS signal from the Titanic, actually came in through that weather bureau. So that is the one I visited was the last of, I believe she said 7 that are still standing. The tower is not there, but they're hoping to put that back up. And they have some great images in there, but it also has the picture of the telegram, which is in Hatteras at the graveyard of the Atlantic Museum. And I also want to say that in their room with a bunch of photos and information, they have a hurricane flag and a tropical storm warning flag, and their hurricane flag is missing because someone stole it. And this is the former U.S. Weather Bureau office that is now a visitor center for Cape Hatteras, and someone stole this. So one, terribly sad that someone would take that, but also a very interesting link about the history there, and I was able to go see that.
Yeah, that's a real historic area. That's a graveyard for ships, right off.
And that's the museum that we went to go see was the graveyard of the Atlantic, and that's where the actual telegram with the correspondence that came in about the SOS. I believe it was an alert that came in, and the Weather Service meteorologist had corresponded, and the message came back that said, "We struck an iceberg," and that's all it says.
Well, we're approaching the 103rd anniversary of that tragedy. Well, my pick of the week is a look back to 1936. On this date, and in fact yesterday, April 5th, the top 4 and 5 deadliest tornadoes occurred in the United States. And these two have kind of been lost through history, but April 5th was the Tupelo, Mississippi F5, and April 6th, 1936 was the Gainesville, Georgia F5. Each of those tornadoes produced about 200 fatalities. And the Tupelo, Mississippi tornado was famous because 1-year-old Elvis Presley survived that tornado. So my pick is an article that sits in the Digital Library of Georgia. And there's some really great historical information about those two tornadoes and some amazing pictures.
And John, it's amazing too. I studied that event some when I worked at the Memphis office, and they think that number is probably lower than it actually is, the death toll, because a lot of the African American people in the area, there was inaccurate accounts of that went on. So the death toll is probably much higher than that. So that's a fascinating event.
Absolutely. In fact, there's a building. Let me check this. I think it was in Gainesville, right? That was a factory, right? Anyway, that you can read about it in the link. But I think there were 70 fatalities in a single building, which may be the greatest number ever from a single building. Lots of interesting information there. Well, I think we are nearing that time with the basketball game also nearing its end. So I think, Mike, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. It's been a great discussion and a much-needed follow-up to our show 2 weeks ago.
My pleasure, John. I thank you all for having me, and it was good to continue to further the discussion.
Well, thanks, Mike. We appreciate it. And we appreciate you listening in. This has been WeatherBrains, a weekly podcast that starts at about 8:30 Central Time, 9:30 Eastern Time. We welcome your emails, your comments, your suggestions, and we wish you a very good evening. I'm John Scala. I'm not James Spann. We wish you a good night. Thanks, everyone.
Great job. Thanks so much,
Thank you, Mike.
A great conversation.
Thanks, Mike.
See you guys later.
So long.
Bye.
Ooh. Hey, everybody's gone. So I was back there doing the weather while watching this on my little desk and my little phone. The national championship game. Better pull that off or they yank us off YouTube here. It's like Duke is going to win. Of course, you'll know by the time you watch this. Now, great show. Having Mike on the show was great. Mike Hudson from the Central Region of the National Weather Service. Great discussion about impact-based warnings and just great stuff. Yeah, Duke wins 68-63. Game is over. Ticker tape is flying. Got a scoot here. Got a busy day tomorrow going down to Tuscaloosa, speaking to one of the schools that was destroyed. The building was destroyed April 27, 2011. Their new building is open. Be kind of a special day. I look forward to that. And that's it. I got to go. Thank you, guys. Y'all have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye.